Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this panel discussion on digital accessibility excellence, a blueprint to assess, build, and test fantastic digital solutions that are truly accessible. My name is Anand Subaraman. I'm the president of BrowserStack, and it's my pleasure to welcome two very illustrious panelists. First up, Deborah Rue. Deborah is a global disability inclusion strategist, an internationally recognized keynote speaker, and a very successful entrepreneur. She has created the UNICEF procurement policy for information communication technology accessibility. And she is world known as an expert and contributor to the W3C cognitive accessibility frameworks and the task force. Deborah, welcome to this panel, and thank you for your inputs and all of that. I'm sure is going to make the session fantastic.
Thank you so much.
We also have Steve Tyler. Steve is the Director of Assistive Technology, Leonard Cheshire, and he has a history of innovating life-changing products in the accessibility arena. From leading the team that developed the groundbreaking synthetic speech, which eventually led to the voice of Alexa, to accessible TV, mobile devices, payment systems, online and web app accessibility initiatives. Steve, it's an honor to have you with us on this panel. Thanks for all your contributions, and I'm sure the audience would love to be educated and learn from you. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. I know you were all expecting Steve Tyler from Aerosmith, and I'm sorry to disappoint you.
This is even better.
I agree.
So today we are going to speak a lot about why accessibility matters. We're going to talk about strategies to start your accessibility journey, build and test, and finally we'll talk about BrowserStack's vision for digital accessibility. Please note as we start the session, we'll be muting all of you to enable the speakers to speak without interruption. We will have time for dedicated Q&A. We will record the session and make it available to all of you. And definitely questions are welcome during the Q&A and during chat. So without much ado, let's begin. So Deborah, let's start, right? Would love to get your perspective, right? And I know we all have, many of us here have a very layman's perspective on why is accessibility crucial in today's digital landscape. But Deborah, from your experience and your wisdom, would love to get your perspective, and perhaps you could share some real-world examples highlighting the need for accessibility as a building block of how we build any kind of software. So Deborah?
Well, and thank you, Anand. And also, I want to thank BrowserStack because we really appreciate in our community organizations like BrowserStack saying, all right, this makes sense. Let's help everyone else be successful with this, because it really is going to take all of us making sure that technology works for all human beings. So special thanks to BrowserStack for including Steve and I on this discussion as well. Accessibility matters for so many reasons. And you might say over 8 billion reasons when you look at the humans on the planet. But it also matters because of what's happening in society right now. There's a lot of really significant shifts. It's very, as we all know, pretty intense times. But at the same time, the numbers are growing, unfortunately, because of conflicts. We are going to have more people with disabilities. We have issues with COVID, long COVID. We are an aging society all over the world. The numbers are pretty staggering. I was talking to somebody the other day in Peru, and they said that by 2050, just a country, Peru, they're going to have over 50% of their population are people with people over a certain age. And we know, according to the association, the AARP in the United States, the American Association of Retired Persons, that is anyone in the United States that's over 55, because you just automatically get added into this group by them. But 67% of the people that are age 55 and older in the United States, 67% are identifying as people with disabilities. So the numbers are staggering. It is also really important to remember that we have legislative reasons to do this. We have litigation reasons. And I know it's very common in the United States to get sued over these issues, but it's not only happening in the States. There's some pretty powerful things happening in other countries as well. And so it's also important to note that as somebody that have been in a field that is considered something that's a do-gooder field, somebody doing something positive for the world, we usually see when we get into a lot of flux, economic problems or big problems in the world, that funding goes away for those kind of activities, for training, for testing, for a lot of things that really make the world work in a better way, I believe. But one thing that we did notice that that happened during these intense times, even with the economic pressures, accessibility did not go away. It is still very important to the brands. They know they have no choice. They have to include us. We do know how to make technology fully accessible, but we just actually have to make sure we're taking the steps and understanding the why of why we're doing this, which is all human beings need access to technology, period. And so accessibility is not going away. It is only getting more important, and all the work that you are doing to make sure not only at BrowserStack, but all of the testers and the QA and QC people that are listening to this, you're so important in this, and accessibility really does matter to all of us that want to be included. So Anand, let me turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I think it was very interesting, your perspective, right? There are multiple things. Everybody needs access to technology, period. I think that is the clear mission statement. And the clear mission statement that all of us need to abide by is that, right? Today's world, it's like having water, electricity, digital technology, and everybody needs access to that. That's very powerful words. Thank you.
Anand, can I just make one more comment based on your comment you just made? Because I thought this was so interesting. There has been a lot of work because of the disasters that we have going on right now. And one thing that Red Cross had noticed, they first noticed, and some UN agencies noticed this as well, when they went in to help people that were in conflict or they had been traumatized because storms or whatever. In the past, it was always, we need food, we need water, we need housing, and they need that all. But the number one thing that's asked for now in an emergency situation, Anand, is access to Wi-Fi, because they know they can try to get out of this trouble themselves if they can get access to the internet. Just wanted to, you made me think of that point. Thank you, Anand.
So true. Yeah. I mean, I saw refugee camps where the most sought after thing is charging stations for the mobile phones and Wi-Fi access. Yeah. Fair point. Steve, would love to get your perspective on a couple of things, Steve, right? So for businesses that are just starting their accessibility testing journey, it's almost like people need to assess where they are and then devise their strategy and then say, what's the to be stage? Right? And from your experience, could you talk about how they should assess it? What kind of methodologies, tools, what best practices perhaps beginners need to follow? And as you have worked with a variety of organizations, what are some of the experiences that you think we should all embrace, right? As
Thank you.
organizations that are on this one. Steve?
Guys, thank you for joining. I'm very aware that you will all come from very different places. Some of you will have coding knowledge, some of you won't. Lots of you will use tools to make stuff accessible. Some of you will subcontract stuff out. And there'll be lots of mix and matches. So by definition, you know, we've got a relatively short time. I can't hope to tell you everything that I know. And by the way, I'm learning every day, despite the years of work that I've done in this space and led some wonderful teams and wonderful people that have enabled lots of great stuff. On one level, it's disappointing because in many ways we're nowhere. And on another, I'm very proud of the people that have brought some of this, some of the work that we see around us today to life for people with disabilities. I think I'm going to give you some nuggets of information to hold on to. And I would consider my job done if at the end of this session, every now and again, you kind of think, that guy, you know, he mentioned something about X. He said something about that. Maybe I should go and just check that out. And my job is done if you even vaguely consider some of the issues that I've talked about. So I think so here are things that I learned and that have had impact on me over time. So what do you do? Where do you start? And you know, it doesn't matter what business you're in, you start from the customer, right? Everybody knows this. Easier said than done, but you start from the customer insofar as you determine the customer journey. You determine what is it you want your customer to experience. What's the offering? How do you want them to get there? What does it look and feel like when you get to where you're going? Accessibility is all about actually reaching those areas, facilitating people with whatever weird and wonderful technology they've got, or systems, or cognitive challenges, or physical challenges, or sensory challenges. It doesn't matter. We all use lots and lots of different tools. And there are accessibility givens that if you go with them, in general, you can very, very rapidly, however complex the issue is, get to somewhere in the region of 80% of the time. But it's all about thinking about the customer and then superimposing on that customer what we might call disability. So you might have a target group of, I don't know, 30 to 50-year-olds that you're targeting with your particular product, or you might have a blog that you've got a particular kind of person in mind. And most people will think about the kind of interest group. Where do you target them? How do you find them? How do you reach out to them? What about the sort of marketing exercise you do? What kind of information are they likely to want? If you add into that, how do people access my stuff? What kinds of technologies do they use? And what are the really important things that I might think about? And that's the bit that I broadly want to talk about today. There are other benefits, by the way, to accessibility, and I just want to touch on those. The first is the obvious. You know, just under 20% of the world's population at the moment with access to the internet has a disability of some kind. So right there, if your stuff is inaccessible, you're not going to reach them. End of discussion. And like most people, I'm one of them, I'm as impatient as the rest of us. You know, if I go into a site that isn't delivering what I wanted, or download an app that isn't delivering what I wanted, and in my case, often it's because it's not accessible, I can't navigate my way around it or can't make any sense of it. If I've got choices, I'm going to take the next one, or I'm going to try an alternative until I find one that I can actually use. And like most of us, I respond in exactly the same way to information as everybody else does. You know, if I get bored of it, if it's not what I wanted, but in particular, if I can't use it, I'm not going to spend lots of time wondering and contacting and trying to figure out good strategies to do it. The founder of Amazon, you will all have relationships with Amazon, and I will give you an example or two in a second of what I'm talking about when I talk about accessibility. He has this concept of a day one and a day two company. You might have heard this before. Day one company is innovative, fresh, delivering as if it's a brand new kid on the block. It's going places, it's vibrant, it's customer obsessed. It wants to delight the customer at every turn, and it wants to deliver the best it can do, because if you're pleased as a customer, you're going to forgive the odd mistake. A day two company has become self-obsessed, and it's almost an inevitable decline. It is the stage at which a company has taken a turn, and the best you can do is halt the decline. And his advice has always been around customer obsession. The customers will guide. If you can deliver the best you can for customers, and that includes accessibility, then you're on the right track. This accessibility stuff, what is it? It's very closely tied to usability, but it's not quite the same. So accessibility literally is the ability to get to the information in the first place that you want. If I'm confronted as a visually impaired person with an image that has no labels, it has no information about what that image is, then other than knowing it's an image, I have no idea what you're talking about. If I go into a website which doesn't use any of the navigation capabilities that I'll talk to you about in a second, then I'm in trouble. It's going to take me a very, very long time to navigate a website, only to find that maybe it's not my thing at all, or it's just going to take too long for me to move around it. A very good in the early part of my time in accessibility, I came across a guy called Jim Thatcher, who used to work for IBM many years ago. And one of the things that used to drive Jim nuts was people would talk about accessibility, and he'd say, you know, you guys, you know, you drive me mad. Here I am, I'm an engineer, and I want to do the best I can do. I'm on your side, but you keep confusing the hell out of everybody. You talk about accessibility, but you don't give us any examples. What can I do as an engineer that enables me to test whether or not I've got it right? And the three tests we came up with were, do I know where I am? Sounds crazy, but this will make sense in a second. Do I know what options I've got? Do I know what I could do? And the third one is, when I select one of those options, did I get to where I thought I was supposed to be? And those tests are really straightforward, very simple, but really do give you a lot of that basic idea is really quite powerful. In terms of nuts and bolts around accessibility around web, in the end, by the way, it all depends, as you know, on all the decisions that you take are dependent on the leadership and the management of the team. You've got to buy the T-shirt. You've got to recognize that this is important. I wanted to mention that important thing isn't just about accessibility that means that people can access your stuff. It also has a direct impact on things like search optimization. So when you navigate a website, If something is well structured and I do a search using Google or any other search tool, I put a specific search term in, it has a notion on what I'm trying to do, and it's going to try to give me the best result. And the only way it can really do that is through structure. And my message to you today is structure is everything. Making sure that systems and processes understand what your structure is. And finally, I'm going to show you screen reading technology in a second. Some of you will have come across this, some of you won't. Screen reading technology operates in a way which means that keyboards are everything. And broadly speaking, that's my big message. If you can access it with a keyboard, if you can move around the display with a keyboard, you're beginning to win. Because virtually every device on the planet, whether it's a device that supports people with a physical challenge, for example, like a switch where they nudge it or push it, it's going to move around using simulated mouse clicks or simulated keyboard movements. And the other thing to bear in mind, I guess, is the very different types of devices. So this is a Braille display. So imagine what this is like. A Braille display, in this case, has 20 characters. In other words, 20 characters on a line, roughly speaking. Or sorry, at any one time I can see 20 characters. So imagine a blank sheet of paper with a cutout that has 20 symbols or 20 characters, if it were a straightforward piece of text, on the screen. And I move that piece of paper around the screen and I see the next 20 or the previous 20. That's it. That's all I've got. So it's hugely important for me to interrogate the screen and interrogate your systems, and then that enables me to move around optimally. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to share the screen. Whoops. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. Someone else is sharing, is that right?
Yes, so Nazreen is sharing the HTML examples on the screen right now.
Oh, sorry, no. If you take that off, we'll come back to that afterwards. Sorry. Thanks. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Steve, for that. Right.
I'm sorry. I'm just about to get into.
Go on, Steve.
To have started.
Okay.
Share preview.
Here's the power of what I'm talking about.
Zoom. Amazon Business Google
I'm
Chrome.
hoping you
Amazon.
can hear the synthetic speech
Link
here.
skip to main navigation.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. So the power of the web rests in these core 4 or 5 elements. First, this is Amazon. Amazon complies in most cases in a really big way with, this is a huge site, multiple, hundreds of links, hundreds of services, sorry, tens of services, lots of ways of navigating. Critically, form fields. So let's say searches. I know there's a search on here.
Enter keyword or product number edit.
I can jump
Space,
straight
banner.
to the search. I'm going to do
Coffee.
coffee beans.
Beans. Enter amazon.co.uk.
And we get a search result for coffee beans.
Link skip to main content page. Skip.
You got there, link skip to main content. Right there, we'll cover this off in coding examples. But there's a little thing that says, bypass all this nonsense, jump to where you want to be. Or I know that each result has a heading attribute. Jump to the first result.
14805 Lavazza heading level 2.
Lavazza.
Qualiterasa coffee beans with air Lavazza heading level 2. Crema e aroma Arabica and Robusta medium roast coffee beans 1 kg pack of Lavazza heading level Crema and aroma coffee beans 6
and as you can
kilogram
see, I'm moving very quickly
L'Or espresso
to
for the
each-
Union hand roasted coffee daily roast coffee
to each item. I'm going to select Union hand
Enter
roasted
list
coffee.
with 5 items. Union hand roasted coffee daily roast coffee beans dark roast pack of 1 kg heading level 2 link blank Union hand roast page has groceries.
And I know that where they do comparisons on Amazon, they use a table layout.
Table with 3 columns and 1 rows. Column 1. Table with 5 columns and 9 rows. Column 1. Row.
A mistake that Amazon makes is not to label the table. Let's forgive them that for a second, because I'm a forgiving kind of guy.
Blank. Row 2. Notes. Row 3.
Notes.
Daily roast 1 kg. Daily roast coffee
And
beans.
I'm going to move around this table using table mode in my screen reading tech.
Deck of 1 kg. Deck of coffee beans. Treacle.
Decaf,
Chocolate and walnut. Column
and
3.
as I'm moving through, it's giving you the, in this case, notes. As I move down the table, because the table has been done correctly,
taste, indulgent, rich and full-bodied.
I'm nowhere near where it says taste, but the screen reader knows what the heading is of this table. It knows that this row is about taste.
Strength 3, row.
Or strength.
Row, strength 3, row, roast, dark roast, row.
Roast. So that's an example of why this is so powerful. Alternatively,
close document window, news, sport, select.
Here I am.
News.
Some people would be appalled by this, but bear with me. This is the Sun newspaper in the UK.
News, boxing, clever, new Rwanda migrant treaty will be done in days and
same kind of idea. This time,
Danny Cipriani seen with bombshell boxer days after announcing marriage split heading level 3 link.
Danny Cipriani, etc. Here's the title of the thing. What they failed to do, and I happen to know this, if I move up from where I am, above the heading, it's not tied to the heading.
Link fine and dandy.
Fine and dandy. And this is an illustration where they have not put the entire heading as a heading.
Heading level 3.
I just have to know, not that it's important, but
tragedy, a 6th body found after blip.
Tragedy, a 6th body found just above it when I move with the virtual keyboard that I'm using.
Link Inferno Horror.
Inferno Horror. So it's not part of the heading. It should be, because that's a kind of critical part, I assume, of what they're trying to tell me, but they've not labeled it properly. They've labeled it enough, though, that I can make sense of it.
Close document window.
And then,
RNIB.
finally, I gave you an example of tables. We talk about images in the coding examples. I'm going to go to a visited link. So this screen reader technology has lots of power behind it.
Visited link RNIB shop home. Visited link bestsellers.
Bestsellers.
Enter RNIB on bestsellers are.
And it's jumped straight to
escape virtual
a search box. But let me try what I did with Amazon before. I thought I did pretty well with Amazon. I jumped very quickly from item to item.
About RNIB heading customer service head contact follow secure powered wrapping to top bestsellers heading level 1 button. About RNIB heading level 2.
Okay.
Bestsellers heading level 1
I'm not getting very far with headings.
Shambali article end. Sort by.
And now I'm at the sort by. So here's a little form.
Sort by. Combo box collapsed recommended.
Combo box collapsed recommended.
1 to 12 of 53.
1 to 12 of 53. So there are 53 items. It's going to let me see 12 of them.
Display number of items on page.
Display number of items on page.
Combo box collapsed 12.
Combo box. So I have to know weird stuff in order to negotiate this thing. But nonetheless, combo box, I know how that works. And there's 12.
List of link page items. 1 to 5.
And
same page link page 2.
I've got lost already, because what I'm expecting here are the results.
Same playlist end. Link graphic Ruby and.
But the results come later. So here is the first result.
Link bestseller. Ruby 4.3 inch and.
And what you'll notice perhaps
link graphic view
is these things are links. They're not list items. They're not heading items.
Link graphic and angle. Link bestseller.
So the best I can do is either tab through them.
Sheet of orange bump stops.
Or move through using my keyboard cursors.
Blueprint.
What I can't do is easily jump really quickly from one item to the next item to the next item. And that causes a problem. Now, RNIB is not on its own here, and you guys will have this. The shopping platform they're using simply doesn't allow them to do what they'd ideally like to do. Tough luck, they've got to do something else, and they make the best of it. But that's an example where you don't have optimized navigation, but you can make it work with a bit of ingenuity.
Screen sharing meeting.
I will stop there.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Steve. That was quite informative. Let's just go on, and we really want Steve to speak a lot about the development. But just before that, Deborah, just passing the baton back to you for a second. You work with a lot of businesses on accessibility. Anything you would like to talk about on the current state of awareness across different businesses, or any trends that you see? And then we will kind of switch back to Steve as well, right? To talk
Thank
through
you. Yeah.
development.
And I'm not going to talk very long because I know there's a lot of questions for Steve and a lot of good comments that are being made as well. Special thanks to Stephen Platten and Erica King when they're talking about what can they do to make a difference with this, because I think once again what we're all realizing is that the accessibility is not going to go away. We need to do it. We need to get it right. But what can we each individually do? Well, BrowserStack has already stepped up doing webinars like this, creating an app. What can we each individually do? And I think, I talked about it in the answer, but talk about what you're doing and why it's important to you, and learn from each other and share with each other. But I also want to say that AI is going to change everything, and it's already starting to. And we're also having a few conversations, Steve, on the chat about AI. And I know we were talking about that a little bit. Is it going to shift? How much is this going to help us make sure that we are making sure that things are fully accessible? So I think there's a lot to be excited about. And the corporate brands, they have committed to including us and making sure everything's accessible. We have groups like the Valuable 500 at the World Economic Forum level there, where we have 500 CEOs that have committed to fully include us. So these issues aren't going to go away. I just hope they're going to continue to grow, and we see the need for it, but then really get into the specific things like Steve is talking about. But how do we really do it, and how are we successful at it? So Anand, I don't want to take too much of the time because I know he's got a lot of other questions, but I also want to tell the audience, any questions that we don't answer here, Steve and I will get the answers back to BrowserStack, because we really want this to be as powerful for y'all as possible. But I think we've got a lot to look forward to, Anand, especially when it's coming to efforts like the Sustainable Development Goals, the corporate social responsibility efforts, the ESG. We're seeing a lot of stuff happening. And this is not going to go away. This is like privacy and security. You must do it. So back over to you, Anand. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Very helpful. So Steve, let's come back to you. Would love to understand development, accessibility.
Okay.
Let's.
If you happy to share the slides, that would be cool. Thank you. Thank you very much. By the way, I knew that because my screen reading technology is monitoring a whole host of things. I got to tell you, it drives you nuts sometimes. One quick tip, by the way, if you imagine that when you're thinking about website development or how you present the customer journey to people with disabilities, quite often information is delivered in a serial versus parallel way. What do I mean by that? Serial, i.e., one thing after another. If I'm using speech, or if I'm navigating because my arms don't work properly and I'm using some unusual or relatively obscure technology to move around the screen, I'm moving a bit at a time, and I'm normally processing stuff as I go. If you have full vision and full cognitive capability and so on, you're processing quite a lot of information in parallel. You're glancing at a screen, you're thinking, yep, don't like that. Next, next, next. Whoa, that's the one I want. The keyword jumped out at me, and because it looks right, I went for that. Forget headings, forget imagery, forget what I'm talking about here. It looked okay. And what I'm asking you to do is to consider that the looking okay thing actually has as much impact on me as it would on you if you tell the browsers, the computers that you're using, that that look is what you wanted. So the first slide here, slide examples. I'm going to arm you enough to be dangerous, right? That's the best I can do at the moment. So arming you to be dangerous means enabling you to ask the right questions. When you have a developer come up and say, yeah, I can do accessibility, I can at least arm you with enough knowledge to know how to test whether or not they're telling you the truth, and how to test whether or not what came out of the development process actually was what you wanted and it complied. Or you can come along and ask Deborah, BrowserStack, or me. So next slide. Navigation, it's just the title. Next slide. First thing is headings. Headings, as I've said, hugely, by the way, feel free to take screenshots of this and we can share it with you. Very happy for any of this stuff to be shared, and the resource page at the end, and we'll get there in a second. But feel free to use and abuse this information in the way you want. Critical message here is, for headings, make sure that you nest headings appropriately. In other words, maintain the structure. Heading level 2 comes after heading level 1 because it's less important. And heading level 3 is even less important than heading level 2. And that makes a massive difference. And it's the headings that drive how the visuals look. In other words, digital first. So go for the structure, then make it look how you like, or pick a style, but stick to the style and be consistent. Be consistent as you decide what the structure looks like. And that only comes with practice, and it only comes with some experimentation, because sometimes you want to overhaul your site. By the way, I have some favorite people who I won't mention who continually, I mean, every 4 or 5 months, I have to write to them and say, hi, me again. You've gone and broken my ability to use your site. You're doing so well, but it means that now I can't actually access the stuff that I've bought from you anymore because you've gone and broken it. Here's the reason why you've broken it. This is what you need to do. So, but only do that with a few people. I've only got so much time in the day and, quite frankly, so much patience, but I'm reliant. That's what makes me do it. And if I could, I wouldn't come back to them, but I can't. Next slide, regions. So regions, you know, there are typical regions on a page, which are shown here. And the critical thing about regions are big chunks, big blocks, big areas of the page. And like, as I mentioned before, just as you have the ability to do a visual kind of reconnoiter of the site, you can very quickly say, no, not interested, moving on, moving on. That's what I want the ability to do too. And the beauty of regions, along with a lot of these other navigation tools, is you can skip. If you don't like it, you can move to where the content is. If I'm in the navigation pane at the top where there's a big old menu structure and whatever, I want to get to the content, skip, and skip to content. So the nav region is normally where we might think of as menu slipping. Okay, next item. So tab order. So this is where I'm tabbing, moving by keyboard across the site. But sometimes tabs can get in the way of things. So a good example might be, let's say there's a map, a complex image like a map. I don't really want to get tangled up inside the map. If I want to interact with it, I will. I'll go back to it and scrutinize it in more detail. So chances are, I actually want to skip the map. I want to know there's a map there, but let's not get too tangled up inside it. And quite often you want the ability to move across the site in an orderly way, and then the ability to skip certain tabs if that's what we're going to do. By the way, this is very important, particularly when it comes to mobile sites or apps even, or the mixture of apps and you know, quite often now web and apps are kind of synonymous in mobile world, or they share lots of attributes. Whereas here I'm giving examples and gave examples earlier of a keyboard-based system, one of the most powerful screen readers on the planet, for which you pay a fair amount of cash, and it is very powerful. I can get past most things, and if push comes to shove, I can do things like optical character recognition on the fly. Most people can't do that. And when you get to mobile level, you're very restricted. You've got gestures, and that's about it. If the gesture fails, if I can't move to the next item satisfactorily, then I'm not going to be able to access your product. So it's critical thinking about the order and that customer journey. Next slide. This is focus indication. So this is about, it's quite often overridden because a lot of people don't like there being a visual indicator on the browser about where you are, but actually it's very useful for lots of reasons, not least the browser and the mechanism that controls it itself, but also users. Next slide. This is bypass blocks. So this is a piece of code that lets you skip to a defined part of the page. There's a piece of code that helps you do that. So this is fast keyboard access, basically. You can skip content on, and I mentioned nav regions and repeated content where you've got repeated items or extraneous items. I just want to get past it. So giving me the ability to skip, or giving anybody the ability to skip, is beneficial. Next slide. So this is form field. There's a title, form fields. Next slide. So textual labels, associating the appropriate label with the appropriate form. And this can be absolutely devastatingly bad. So classic kind of scenarios, and we'll get to some of them in a minute, are where, I don't know, I've been on the site just earlier actually, where it's kind of irritating but dealable with. So the zip code, when it announced this is where I want you to type in the zip code, what it actually wanted was the first line of the address. And it's because there wasn't an appropriate association between the label and the field. Absolutely critical. Next slide. This is a graphical label. And there are two broad ways of doing graphics, but well, many more. But anyway, I'm going to focus here on two most common ones. This is an image with alt text in it. So this is where people sort of talk about the alt attribute, the alternative attribute, or the alternative label describes the image. And be a little bit careful with this one. So again, from a customer point of view, put yourself in the shoes of the customer. Is this an ornamental image? In which case, you know, tell me it's an ornamental thing, or just give me a very rapid description. Or is this a really important piece of information you desperately want me to know about? In which case, pay a little bit more attention to how you describe it, or tell me to look further down the page. If it really is critical, give me a textual description too. And often a textual description outside of the alt descriptor is a good thing, depending on what it is. But, you know, if you want to give some detailed information, then often you've got choices here. But the alt descriptor is a very powerful thing, and this is how you would do one. Classic coding example. Next slide. Alternatively, this is an SVG label, scalable vector graphics. Another way of doing imagery. This is an illustration of what they call an ARIA label. And it's used because the alternative description at the moment is not available or not often used. I don't think it's actually available. Don't hold me to that. But this is an example of how you might deal with a graphic that isn't an image, isn't a JPEG or whatever. Next slide. This is a required form field. So quite often there are no visual indicators to show you that this. So if it's a critical thing like an address or it wants a email address or some other identifier, quite often there's no visual indicator to say that. And you only discover it when you realize that the button that you need to press to go to the next piece of the jigsaw is still grayed out. In my case, most irritatingly, as I'm typing, quite often, if it's not coded up properly, every time I press a key, I'm trying to put in my email address, for example, it's going to say, you know, that it's not completed properly, or it's a required field, or whatever. Or I only discover that I've not dealt with it properly when I finally get to the button, which I discover is grayed out because I've not played the game or the system isn't happy with what I put in. Next slide. Invalid form field, similar problem. You can fill it in, but you can't see the message. I can't see the message that says, if you don't code it correctly, that says this is an invalid form field. You've not completed it properly. It might do all sorts of other things, but it's not specifically spelling out to me this is invalid. Next slide. Tables. Tables are hugely important. I've demonstrated some of them, but here you go. Next slide. This is a table overview. So critical thing, if you don't do anything else, ideally, keep your tables looking regular. In other words, don't have one row that has, 7 items in it, and then the next row has 15 items or 10 items. Try to be consistent about the table layout. Not only does it help with systems and processing, but it definitely helps with accessibility because you begin to know what you can expect. And part of the reason that you can expect, because even if you've not coded it up properly, please do code it up properly. But if you haven't, and you've delivered a consistent table, smarter devices, smarter software like JAWS, for example, the screen reader I was showing you earlier, will be able to deduce what's going on. You don't want that ideally, but that is what will happen. Next slide. Table head. That's where that clever thing happens where, the column headings and row headings, you've clearly demarcated what they are, and you're effectively giving screen reading technology and other assistive technology an easy time of it. It knows what the headings, it doesn't have to guess about it. You've told it where the headings are, and it allows for visual discrimination as well when you're looking at them. Next slide. A table body example. So this will announce row and row headings, etc. And it allows this code allows the browser to align things correctly. And by doing that, again, you're making it easy for consistency and for systems to work correctly. And next slide. There's a table end example. And, this is a kind of a typical kind of example that you might expect a tabular layout on. Next slide. Table speech. This is by using correct coding. The result that you're seeing here is what the heading, is what the speech will read out properly, and it's an example, but this is the sort of thing you want to get to. So fundamentally, when you lay tables out, they need to make sense to the screen reading technology, and you can determine how they're likely to be read out, and you can test these things. Next slide. Here's a bunch of resources for you, not least BrowserStack as a fantastic tool for checking out how well you're doing. If you want to have a look at coding examples and so on, there's a great resource here around finding example bits of code, and you can do searches on that site. It's the Code Camp one, and you can do searches around accessibility. You can do table examples. There's a community of people there, and you can check stuff out to see if you're on the right track. The other thing I would say is, in a way, it's hugely important to pay attention to those examples that I've just run through. There are many examples we could have given, but these are classic accessibility challenges that most people don't know about, or don't think about, or don't know how to fix. If you want to check out a website for yourselves, or as you're moving through it, most of you, if you have access to a computer, control Windows Enter as a hotkey, or you can go into the accessibility area of your PC, and you can fire up Narrator. Everybody has it if you've got a Windows operating system. If you're using Apple, there is VoiceOver. If you're using Android, there is TalkBack. All of them well, as long as you make sure, by the way, that you can get back out of it. So just make sure you know how to exit the thing, because otherwise you'll become very frustrated. I've done that before inadvertently, frustrated people. Here you go, look at that, amazing. VoiceOver, you can trigger on your phone. Isn't that amazing? And then if you don't help them back out, they're stuck in weird gesture land. So don't do that to yourselves. Make sure you understand how to get back out, and make sure you understand how to turn Narrator back off. It's a toggle. Control Windows Enter. But it's a fully fledged screen reader. It will allow you to mess around with your site. You can literally move around the site and experience the site as I would experience it. Listen to how it's describing what you've done. And it's a great way of doing it. But nothing beats asking people. Nothing beats talking to customers and reaching out to people like Deborah and to BrowserStack, to RNIB, for example, who do a great service. There are lots of us around. To me, I can point you in the right direction, because I've been in really quite horrific examples. Big name, one of the biggest, you've all got it on your desktop. I won't mention their name, terribly embarrassing. Did all the business, ticked all the boxes, made it all happen with a brand new library system. Problem is, they didn't actually check with users. Customers didn't actually have a go on it, and the big day came and no one could use it. Don't do that to yourselves either. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was incredible. I mean, I learned a lot about how to code with accessibility standards. I hope all of you did too. It's quite eye-opening. I didn't realize the table side, there was so much to watch out for. I mean, and Deborah, you're right. I mean, AI is going to change some of these radically. And
I forgot to mention, can I just quickly say, don't do what the guys did to me or do to me on a continual basis. When you go on the accessibility journey, and it is a journey, you won't get it right, and it's never going to be right. Tools change, technology changes, in the same way that you're always revising how you talk, how you think about your customers, what the offerings are that you're doing, how you lay out your, quite frankly, sometimes it's just pure boredom. You want to change your site, you want to refresh, you want to rebrand, all sorts of reasons. Customer journey and the accessibility element of that never ever ends. But make sure that in your processes, once you start the customer journey that focuses around accessibility or includes accessibility, because you've never done it, you'd never dream of I don't know, not thinking about the font size or the images or whatever that you did on your site. And in the same way, don't dream of forgetting about accessibility. When you do an overhaul of the site, do the check. Make sure that you've not broken anything, or if you have broken it, well, at least you know, and you can find ways of fixing it, or again, come to one of the teams here and get some help. But don't just ignore it, because one of the worst, in a way, I'd rather have never experienced your brilliant offering. I want to experience all your brilliant offerings, by the way, all of them. But I'd rather not have experienced it at all than I've experienced it and then you took it away.
Got it. Got it. Steve, again, thank you so much. Right. I know we are about 2 minutes out, right? So I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So very quickly, 3 things, and then we'll wrap up, right? One, within BrowserStack, we have started to make a lot of contribution to digital accessibility, right? And we are trying to do what we do typically best in creating developer and tester-friendly, best-in-class testing products. So one thing I would like to encourage all of you is to go to browserstack.com/accessibility and test our products, right? We have solutions that enable testing, reporting, and monitoring, and we try and make them as easy to use by all of you, and just make it super efficient and effective, right? So please go and try it, right? And finally, I mean, I really enjoy the conversation, right? Deborah, thank you for your perspective. And Steve, hats off. I mean, I really cannot say it more, right? I mean,
Thank you very much. Honestly, it's a real pleasure. And genuinely, if any of you, I can't always guarantee to, I told you I was always learning, can't always guarantee to answer the question, but I will find somebody that will if you have a specific.
Yep, we will. And again, I learned a lot, and I'm hoping all of you who attended today learned a lot as well. Thank you. Bye now.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.